Welcome everyone. The presentation will begin shortly. This session will be recorded and will last 60 minutes with about 45 seconds of presentation followed by time for questions and answers. Please keep your microphone muted during the presentation and turn off your cameras. If you have a question or comment, enter it in the chat during the presentation and it will be addressed during the question and answer period. You may also ask questions with video during the question and answer portion. All participants in today's event will have access to the recorded version, which will be available within 1 week of the live event. My name is Joshua Gordon, and I will be the moderator for today's presentation. TESOL International Association Speech, Pronunciation, and Listening Interest section is pleased to present this webinar titled Jawbreaker and the SOUND-TICKLERS, an EFL phonics storybook to teach pronunciation to young learners. Our speaker today is Professor Stella Palavecino from Buenos Aires, Argentina. We are very pleased to welcome all of you to this webinar, and now I'll hand it over to our speaker.
Thank you, Joshua, and thank you everyone for joining this presentation. Before I start, I would like to say thank you to the organizers for this invitation. I feel really honored to be with you today. And thank you so much for the opportunity and all the people that joined this presentation as well. Now to turn about me, I would like to tell you that I'm a graduate EFL teacher and I'm working as a teacher at translator training, teacher training and translator training, and also as a writer. To be more specific, I'm a phonology lecturer at Instituto de Enseñanza Superior en Lenguas Vivas, Juan Ramón Fernández in Buenos Aires. And this panorama allows me to have a great picture of pronunciation. And I realized that people in general find it difficult, very difficult. And if you ask learners in a classroom what areas of learning English they matter the most, they would probably say pronunciation. And if you ask teachers, you get the same response. Anyway, if we look closely into material to help all these people around, we find wonderful material in the market. And what do? So much interest in pronunciation and so much material that people can take advantage of. And then they still find it difficult. So the question is why? Why is it that with so much interest and material, people still find it hard? So I'm going to address this issue today. It's not going to be research heavy, it's going to be more practical. You will tell me at the end. But I tried to select a number of things that are going to be helpful in a way. Let's take a look at the agenda first. We are going to go through teachers' views on pronunciation, and I would like you to help me with your opinion on certain statements. After that, teaching pronunciation to young learners, storytelling, pronunciation and the brain, and then my presentation, which is emophone stories or emo-prone stories or stories for the non-native speaker of English. So here we are. This is what some teachers say about pronunciation. And I would like you to take a look at this and tell me if you agree or disagree to these statements. Or if you have any ideas to add, please write them down in the chat box. The first one is pronunciation is essential to develop other areas of language teaching. What do you think about this? Do you agree? Disagree? Please take a moment to answer write your answers on the chat box, please. Don't be shy. You can say you agree. Okay. Thais de Costa agrees, strongly agree. Yes. Well, this is the main issue, right? We believe that pronunciation is restricted to listening and speaking, but in fact, it is also connected to reading and writing. It may seem surprising, But readers of a language with an alphabetic writing system store the most recently material in the working memory, not visually, but phonologically. It seems strange, but it's the way it works. So when we read, we take the words off a page and send them to the short-term memory. Imagine that we read a word like 3, but we don't know how to pronounce 3 in River Plate, Buenos Aires. We need to be taught that sound, and we say tree or free. This is not a phoneme that it is found in the Spanish language, so it may be confusing, you know? This happens all the time. It's strange and it confuses. In the brain, when we read, there's a central executive. That central executive sends the words that we are reading in a phonological loop. So in order to select meaning from the lexicon that we have in our heads, those words go round and round and are sent to the long-term memory to pull back meaning or for storage. So if we don't know the correct pronunciation, the sound traits of the words are not well processed and we lose them. So the outcome that we get is that the events that we are reading are lost. This research was shown by Robin Walker at TESOL Conference 2022. And this is proved that when we read, everything is recorded phonologically. And the root of reading is not in reading itself, it's in poor pronunciation. And what do we do as teachers? We ask students to read more instead of focusing on pronunciation problems. Anyway, reading a text, extracting the main ideas of a text, has to do with something we call higher level activities or higher level skills. When we read at the word level, we deal with lower level reading skills. So we need to focus on lower level reading skills first before getting into reading passages. And for this, we need to teach our students to decode pronunciation in a certain way, to decode the alphabetic code in a different way. We need to develop phonological awareness, getting to recognize the relationship that there can be between the 3 and the tree. So you want to write the word three, so we go into TH is like 2 letters that make one sound. E, 2 letters make one sound. E, 3, before getting into comprehending the paragraph. All right, I spoke too much. Now, number 2, I'm not sure how to teach sounds. Are you sure about that? Are you sure of teaching pronunciation? Do you feel the same way? Do you agree? Disagree? What type of work can you do with your students when you teach pronunciation? Please write in the chat box. You agree or disagree? Are you sure about the teaching of sounds? Can you write in the chat box, please? Okay. Yes, it is very useful. Thank you. I can do that with the help of a textbook. Yes, right. I love your explanation. You're not talking too much. Thank you. All right. Well, you know, there are different approaches to teaching pronunciation. Phonics may be one option. So now phonics is trendy, isn't it? It's very popular because it is an approach that is based on decoding the sounds and its relationship with the letters. So it's very clear, isn't it? If you tell somebody, or if you show a word like cat, and you want to teach your students how to write cat, you may say, You want to write the word cat, so listen to the words, to the letters in cat. At, at, at. Cat. We should train students to hear sounds in words. In this way, we foster phonological awareness and we focus on word level first. And we had to do a lot of this. The major problem for non-native speakers of English is that we need to acquire the sounds. Then we teach them how to read or a relationship between the sound and the letter. But first, they need to acquire the sound. So phonics seems to be an ideal approach for teaching pronunciation to beginners. Even at adults or teenage classes, it's very easy. They love it, they have fun, and they understand. So if you are teaching a word as 3, as I told you before, we need to make sure that they say 3 and not 3 or tree before plunging into writing. Because they try to connect the phoneme to the nearest sound in their mother tongue. So we don't know what to do. Sometimes, and that leads us to number 3, I was taught pronunciation explicitly. You may say, put the tip of the tongue behind the upper teeth and push out air, right? Or put the tip of the tongue, between the upper and the lower teeth and push up air, as in 3, 3. Now listen again, 3. Students listen to you. They put the tip of the tongue between the upper and the lower teeth and they say 3, 3, 3. No, say 3, 3. Yes, miss, I'm saying 3, 3. So that's the missing link to make students notice the right place of articulation, and we cannot do this. So how can we get to the root of changing articulatory habits? How can we get children to get new intelligible sounds? Now, I was taught pronunciation explicitly, and I find it difficult to tackle it the same way with young learners. How do you teach sounds, explicitly or in a different way? You agree or disagree to this statement, please? Let me know. Please write your answers in the chat box, please. Yes, you agree. Okay. Right, we need to tackle pronunciation using techniques that address the way EFL learners acquire sounds. Some adults, for example, understand the description of a place of articulation. And so you may use a target language to describe the articulation of a sound. And practice may be centered on listen and repeat. And it's fine. They get the right sounds. They practice a lot and they speak intelligibly enough. With children, we cannot use language to talk about language. And listening and repeating should be done, but in a different way. It has to be meaningful. Piaget says that children are sense makers and they need to find a reason for doing things. We need to find a meaning that encourages them to perform a task. That could be a game, a song, but just not playing a game or singing a song for the sake of singing or playing. We have another objective, another goal as teachers. And so why not using games and songs to favor pronunciation? The brain has a lot to do with this. Whatever we do generates chemicals in the brain that favors or hinders learning. If the students feel very bad about what they are doing, they won't be able to repeat it. And so learning will be like a blockage. When doing activities that we enjoyed, a chemical called dopamine is released. and that generates a positive experience, making learning more memorable. So we need to foster all this, right? So number 3 and number 4 are quite related to that. Now, what can we do? What type of approaches can we use for young learners, for example? Because with teenagers and adults, we said that we can also use phonics. We can teach them or train them to hear the sounds in words. Now, with little children, we teach a word. For example, car, car. So you introduce the picture and you introduce the word and you tell them, well, this is a car and this is the way car is written. It works with some children, but it doesn't work with all children. Why not? Because this approach is based on memory. They need to remember the word, what it means, and link that word to certain spelling. So what if we use phonics, as I told you before? What if we train students to hear sounds in words? Children, you want to write car, k, a. So the ra sound after a vowel sound makes it longer. K, a, car. In this way, children remember the words as a whole, and also they remember some phonological rules as well. They will soon learn that the vowel sound plus a ra sound makes a sound longer. So this is giving students a tool, because then they will transfer that the same rule, phonological rule, to other words as well. It's not always that they learn a word as a whole. They can transfer whatever they learned in one word to other words. And this is more inclusive as well, because if one approach is based on memory, well, then children need to be good at memorizing things. And sometimes children don't really remember things. You teach them a song, for example, head and shoulder, knees and toes, and some children remember. You don't know how they remember. Rosemary says teaching sound and symbol too early is a disaster in English. Yes, I agree. I couldn't have agreed more. Okay. Yes, we need to do a lot of sound awareness. I'm going to show you some activities that we do, like developing phonological awareness with some activities, like listening to some phonemes at the beginning or at the end. But I'm trying to introduce very briefly phonics in order to plunge into the tool I'm presenting today, which is stories. Stories to introduce new sounds to the non-native speakers. Thank you, Rosemary, for saying that. Anyway, phonics seems to be ideal for beginners, for the non-native speaker of English, Rosemary, that already knows how to read and write, because it trains learners to hear sounds in words and also fosters memorization of hearing sounds in words. So imagine, for example, that we are teaching a sound, we are teaching a word like Jawbreaker, which is the name of the story I'm presenting today. Spanish speaker from the River Plate would say Jawbreaker, because the ja sound will be related to the nearest sound in the mother tongue, that is sh in sho. So instead of saying Jawbreaker, they would say Jawbreaker. And unless you show them where to place the tip of the tongue, they will keep on saying sho. And you say, no, it is jaw. And they will say, yes, miss, I told you, sure. Well, that would be a disaster, as Rosemary is putting through. And if one of the characters' name is, yes, very good, Agustina, is the case of negative transfer. Yes, this is what I'm trying to explain. Instead of talking about Jack, that is the main character I selected in the Jawbreaker and the SOUND-TICKLERS, they would say Shuck, changing the word, becoming completely unintelligible. Or Gin, in Ginny would be more Shin than Gin. The problem is that in the non-native speaker class, we need to introduce new words, new sounds, new articulatory habits, all this before plunging into phonics. Can you say, put the tip of the tongue on the alveolar ridge with children, and then push out air and say, j, j, j? They will probably not understand. That will be overwhelming. And in the brain, another chemical is released that is oxytocin, which is responsible for stress. And if students are stressed, they will never learn. So I suggest an approach to teaching sounds that is more connected to the brain. Have you ever heard about the effects of stories on the brain? I'm talking about something I'm introducing right now called emophone story or emo-prone stories, the connection between emotions and pronunciation through stories. It is interesting, you know, it's very much interesting because the brain is framed for storytelling. Stories are powerful. They create an emotional bond with the audience. And our brain is prepared to remember things that are connected to emotions. So we enjoy an activity and the brain releases this chemical called oxytocin. That is the chemical of pleasure. We sympathize with the characters that are in the story and we release another chemical that is called dopamine. It's a chemical of sympathy, love. So everything is emotionally attached to a feeling that is positive. No matter how good they are at remembering things, they will remember what is stuck in emotions. They will remember laughter. They will remember what surprises them. So here is the term emophones. So I'm suggesting using the story from that perspective. So what if we introduce a story that has a neural coupling, that activates that neural coupling between the listener and the speaker? A story that activates parts in the brain that allows the listener to turn the story into their own ideas and their own experience. This is the approach I'm suggesting. What if we create a memorable story whose conflict has to do with a sound that need to be noticed? Especially the place of articulation that it is so difficult to be changed, to be noticed by little ones. And in this way, we can facilitate, we can scaffold the acquisition of intelligible sounds. This is the scaffold that we need, perhaps, the missing link. Children can make sense of the new sound, and unlike literature, emophone stories introduce a conflict that is not solved with a morale. This time, they will remember that the conflict was solved by acquiring a new articulation habit, and it's memorable because stories are powerful and we create emotional bonds with the audience. So I have written a few stories to introduce different sounds. For example, Samki teaches the sa sound in a memorable way, and children acquire the new sound in a playful way. In this way, we are aiming at training children to say 3 and not free or tree. Or the polar bear bin that introduces a story focusing on aspiration. So as to help children to say pin and not bin, and changing articulatory habits in that way. Now, Let me tell you what I do before actually reading the story aloud. I do a kind of retask. You know why? Because when we tell a story, children find English difficult to follow, difficult to understand. So if we do a pre-task in which we introduce a question that is going to be answered just by listening to the story, they're going to be hooked in the reading. And the whole story is going to be easier to understand and to follow. So language is not going to be something difficult for them, and they're going to understand what the conflict is. Now, imagine that you are my students, right? That you are little children. So I'm going to do the pre-task with you before actually presenting you the Jawbreaker and the SOUND-TICKLERS. Now, who is that? Can you listen? Somebody's knocking at the door. Who is it? It's me, the Jawbreaker. Oh my God, the Jawbreaker. I'm sorry, we are busy at the moment. Please go away. No, I cannot go away. I need to find a place to sleep. I came from England. I am very tired. I'm looking for a bed to sleep. I'm sorry, but there are no beds here. It's a Zoom meeting. There are a lot of teachers there. We cannot find beds. Yes, behind your upperteeth, there is a comfy sofa where I can sleep. Please, let me in. Let me get into your mouths. Okay, I'm going to talk to the audience. Come back later. Goodbye, Jawbreaker. Oh my God, wait a minute. He says that there is a comfy sofa behind the upper teeth. Can you feel it? Yes, I feel like a mountain there. All right, perhaps he wants to get in, but he's too big. Oh, we are in danger. Where can we find the answer to this question? Oh my God, we need some help. Where can we find the answer to a question? I know, in books. Let's listen to the Jawbreaker and the SOUND-TICKLERS and see if we can find the answer to protect ourselves from jawbreakers. Listen.
The Jawbreaker and the SOUND-TICKLERS, an EFL World of Phonics for Young Learners by Stella Palavecino. Jack and Ginny went up the hill to find a mobile signal. Jack fell down and dropped his phone into a big sweet jar, and Ginny came tumbling after. Unfortunately, a Jawbreaker flew into Ginny's mouth. A lady saw the scene and came out of the sweet shop and cried, "Help! The poor girl cannot talk. What a tragedy!" Jawbreakers are sweets that stick to your mouth. Behind children's teeth, they find a comfy sofa and get long sleeps. So Jack took a stick and, like a flash, went to hit Ginny's jaw. "Stop!" cried the lady. "Get help! Please help!" A girl that was near heard the lady clearly. She ran over and said, "Just behind the upper teeth, Jawbreakers find a comfy sofa where they like to sleep. But they cannot resist tickles, so follow my tricks. Turn the tip of your tongue into feathers and push with the tip against the Jawbreaker that is behind your lips. Then push and push more and suddenly let it go." The JG SOUND-TICKLERS will be heard and push the Jawbreaker away. So Ginny did just as the girl said. "Goodbye, Jawbreaker," she said with a grin. That's how the children learn to frighten Jawbreakers away. Here's the trick. Sound ticklers in Jack go j, j, j to push jawbreakers away.
Okay, now then I'm going to show you how to work with it, with the song. But basically, once a new sound is noticeable, they say that they can find the jawbreaker just tickling them. So the first practice is experimenting with sounds. And in that way, we are going to generate another positive experience with pronunciation. How can we find jawbreakers? So give children a baby jawbreaker. We have this in Argentina, yes? And I say that they are baby jawbreakers because they are smaller. Can you see them? And safe for children. So this is going to be engaging. The practice of the sound is going to be engaging. Experimenting with sounds is something meaningful, and repetition is going to be that way, not blind. So we need a baby jawbreaker just to fight a jawbreaker away. Now, follow my instructions. You tell children, chew the sweet, don't swallow it. Take it to the comfy sofa that is behind the upper teeth. I mean, this type of sweets suck behind the upper teeth when you chew them for a couple of seconds. And so the tip of the tongue is going to push, if you try with the children, it's going to push the sweet away. So that will be the way in which you train children to fight the jawbreakers. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, put the tip of the tongue as if they were feathers and tickle the baby jawbreaker. So children try and they have a lot of fun doing this. J, j. And the sound ticklers in j will come out. So they will say j and no sha. Because unless they press the tip of the tongue against the jawbreaker, the baby jawbreaker or the alveolar ridge, the sound j will not come out. So in that way, they learned how to fight a jawbreaker. That will be step number 1, working with jawbreakers. Now, step number 2, once they get the sound, repetition takes place, but not blind repetition, just repetition in this framework, a song. So they go, sound ticklers in Jack go sound ticklers in Jack go to push jawbreakers away. Sound ticklers in Ginny go sound ticklers in Ginny go to push jawbreakers away. And you go on and on and on. But in that way, repetition is meaningful. You know, while listening, you can correct them by saying, well, are you tickling the jawbreaker? Because they can say, sound ticklers in shack go shoo, shoo, shoo. So while you're listening, you can say, well, are you tickling them? So you help them to place the tip of the tongue in the right place of articulation. And it's easy and it's fun and it works. They will remember how to put the tip of the tongue on the alveolar ridge without you resorting to the target language. And they will probably leave the classroom singing, and they will sing to their parents a song at home. And well, this is how music works, you know? It's memorable. Even songs that you don't like, haven't you found yourself singing a song at the end of the day that you don't really like, but you keep on repeating it? Well, that's how music and the brain works. Now, you taught new sounds, you make the new place of articulation noticeable, students can produce it, they have practiced through a song, so now we can start relating that sound to a spelling, right? But how? Well, first, raising phonological awareness through pictures. Now, listen, you can work. Please use the chat box to answer this question. What is this? What is it? Jack, number 1 or number 2? Please write your answers on the chat box. Number 1 or number 2? Jack. Look at the picture and tell me. What is it? This is a game you can play with your students. Yes, it's number 2. What about this one? Shack, shack. What is it? Number 1 or number 2? Shack. Number 1, yes. What's this? Gin, gin, gin. Number 1 or number 2? Number 2, well, and you can continue doing this type of practice to raise phonology and awareness. Now I'm going to show you some activities that were carried out in real classrooms. The first one was carried out in Buenos Aires, in which the word was presented as a whole for the first time. So children were trying to identify one phoneme at a time. The story is Samki, Sasa Samki. So you can see the teacher holding up a Samki puppet. It's Kill the Mosquito. It's a famous game, Kill the Mosquito. See, so he's going to say one word, and children will have to kill the mosquito on that word.
A thin pencil. Yeah. See, very good. Let's try. Let's try. And Valen, you guys are there, and you guys are there. There we go. Listo. A thick monitor.
Okay, I couldn't get that one. And here, well, students are more advanced. This is not in Buenos Aires. So the teacher was trying to make children notice the first phoneme and to change the word just by changing the first phoneme of each of the words. So we had to do a lot of this before actually asking children to read or write.
Okay, next. The first is book.
Right, you see, so little by little, phonological awareness is developed that way. And after that, you can continue with all the lovely material that is available on the websites using phonics for the native or non-native speakers. But we need that missing link before we actually work with phonics if you are teaching a non-native speaker class. Once the memory is activated, training to hear the sounds is what follows, but we also need to teach the articulation first. It's very difficult for the non-native speakers. Now let's try to put emophone or emoprone stories in a nutshell. As teachers, we need to set priorities. Priorities are not the same all over the world because there are a lot of variants. I'm talking about Spanish from Buenos Aires, but Brazilians or Chileans or, well, Colombia or people from all over the world can set other priorities. It is that sound that children do not have in their mother tongue and need to be acquired. So choose sounds that non-native speakers need to acquire to sound intelligible. Then we can use these stories to make the new articulatory habit noticeable, memorable. We can change brain chemicals into, if we want to change pronunciation as well. Use hands-on activities to experiment with new sounds with children. We need to go to hands-on activities and songs and games for repetition. Not blind repetition, but meaningful repetition. And after that, well, you can go on with phonics. The jolly phonic that you find on the internet. So this type of stories introduces a new approach that I called emophone stories or emoprone stories. They are strongly connected to experience, to emotions, and they are powerful. So why not use them as a resource for the missing link that I see in the EFL class? Learners do not need to get a native-like pronunciation. The goal should be intelligibility. But how can they get the words off a page and grasp meaning if they cannot pronounce them? Pronunciation is everywhere. It is in reading, in writing, in listening. It's everywhere, in speaking, of course. So I'm suggesting a word of emophone stories to connect pronunciation to emotions, because that way we can teach students the way they learn. It is memorable, meaningful, it's fun. And well, we need to teach the way children learn. And stories is part of their world. Songs, games are part of their world as well. So this is a key role. Emophone stories is a key issue in my opinion to acquire new sounds, because it works. Many teachers have said that, well, we cannot use meta language to teach children, right? So we should teach them the way they learn. I am suggesting these plays, emophone stories, and we need to discover a new world. So let's do it. Let's go for it. If you want to visit a website that I'm working on at the moment, you're going to find there all these storybooks I have written. And also, if you want to be trained into writing this type of material or other type of material, I'm also teaching pronunciation course during the summer with a very well-known teacher called Mal Hancock. Sorry, it's not available there. So here are my references. And of course, yes, I can share the slides. Send me an email and I send you the slides, or I send Joshua the slides for him to share to the audience, right? Thank you very much. Now time for questions, right?
Thank you, Professor Palavecino. We have a few questions here from our audience.
Okay.
The first one says, how about adults? One of our participants says, at the moment I have a student who says my jot instead of my job, wet instead of weak, wit instead of weak. In general, his k and b are the tricky letters for him. Do you think he'll be able to make himself understood outside of class? And do you have any suggestions for me to apply in class?
Yes, I think that phonics can be adapted to teenagers and adults as well. I don't use the same material, the same activities and games, but there are visual markers that you can show them. But before that, we need to acquire the sound. There must be a movement, a trick, something in the mother tongue that will be the starting point to get the new sound. So students have that feeling that they can do something. For example, the word conjugue, that j sound is a sound I taught. So you can make students notice some tricks, movements in their mother tongue. Or, well, then you mentioned another word. I think it was vowel quality.
Wit instead of weak.
Okay, well, that has to do with the vowel quality. Personally, I like to work with a program called Audacity free of charge. So you can download it on your computer, because sometimes you tell the students, well, it is weed. And they say, well, it's with. No, it's weed. Say it again, and they repeat the sound without the proper length or tension. But if they see it on a spectrogram, you know, Audacity, you can record yourself a word and you can see the spectrogram. And if you can measure the two words, imagine that the student records himself saying weed. So the length of the vowel sound is going to be longer than in with. Right?
I think the problem is also the last consonant. This is she says, the participant says that the student says wheat instead of wheat. So it's
okay.
the last sound.
Pre-40s clipping them. Well, it can be shown on Audacity as well, because you can show the same sound and they can see how in 40s consonants, the sound, the vowel sound is reduced. And with linear consonants, the consonant sound is shorter than the vowel sound. So you need to do a lot of this, showing them first, showing them how the vowel is reduced before certain consonant sounds, and then practice. Mark Hancock, in one of the books I edited with him, suggested some games that are kind of, they are like mazes. Students have to find a way out just by pronouncing or by choosing the right words. So that is also a practice, I mean, reading aloud, that is repetition meaningful because it's in the context of a game. It's a meaningful repetition without actually just reading and repeating, which is too much stress, and oxytocin is released. Sorry, cortisol is released, which is responsible for stress. So students stop learning in that way. So what I suggest is first showing them on Audacity, for example, which is a hand-on activity. Students will be actually seeing the sound, the spectrogram, and measuring how long it could be, how long the vowel could be before a 40th consonant, and that is reverse in linear consonants. So the vowel sound could be as long as it can be before a linear sound, and the consonant sound is shorter. For example, beat and bead, bead, beat. So the first one is being shortened because of pre-40s clipping. The 40s consonant sound shortens the vowel sound. And in bead, bead, the vowel sound is longer and the consonant is shorter. And they can measure all that on Audacity, even on Pratt, but it's more difficult. And for visual learners, they can identify which sound is longer and under what circumstances the sound is longer. So spectrograms helps a lot. Why? Because the students see and they cannot say, well, no, that's not the way I'm pronouncing it. Yes, I'm pronouncing it the way you are. I'm doing what you are saying that I'm doing, but they are not. So unless they see it, it's like proving what they are pronouncing. So that is fantastic about language laboratories. I think that most pronunciation teachers should have a language laboratory with them, because it proves what students are actually saying, so they can record themselves and see what they are saying. And so they self-correct, because then they try to make the vowel sound shorter or longer, and the same applies to consonants. They realize whether the consonant sound should be shorter or longer, because there's pre-40s clipping. Does it answer the question? Have I talked too much? Oh, I'm sorry, I speak so much.
I think you did. We have another question here. It says, I wonder what we can use instead of those sweets in the experimental stage to make the sounds memorable and fun. Any other suggestions instead of sweets?
Yes, fruits, for example. I'm thinking about fruits because some children cannot eat sweets. Grapes, for example, or strawberries. First they chew it, make sure that they did not swallow what they are chewing. And then what is left should be stuck behind the upper teeth on the mountain that we have on the alveolar ridge. So you need to make sure that children notice that the jawbreaker or the baby jawbreakers or jawbreakers' friends are helping them to fight jawbreakers. So they chew it, and they, with the tip of the tongue, they place it on the alveolar ridge or behind the upper teeth, and then they push forward to tickle it. And they say that sound ticklers, jack, jack, jack.
We have, well, there's another question that says, can we have the slides and the link of the videos, please? I think that you mentioned that you could provide those, right?
Yeah, send me an email or I send them to you, Joshua.
And this recording will be posted on YouTube in about a week, approximately. We have another, this is not a question, it's more of a comment, but I'm pretty sure that you can comment more about it. One of our participants says, when the teacher reads aloud, the other students can listen and learn sounds. Follow under the words in the sentence with an index finger. I also had an adult non-native speaker whose speaking was fairly accurate. He couldn't read until one day when he was tracking the words.
Yes, of course. Right. Yes, you can use a lot of strategies, teaching strategies to teach pronunciation. I'm showing something that might be innovative for young learners and memorable. And anyway, it is very much connected to phonics. So that's the reason why I try to introduce some phonics techniques as well, but also showing with the finger. And also now you can take a picture with a mobile phone and show them where to place the right articulation. Could work. But in my opinion, why are stories powerful? Because they anchor on the long-term memory. It's for this neural coupling power of stories. I believe they are more powerful than any other strategy. You remember stories. If you go to the cinema and you watch a story or you watch a film, a movie in American English, you remember what happens. You remember there was a problem and how the problem was solved. So the most powerful thing in these stories is that they remember how to fight the sound, the jawbreakers, how to produce the sound ticklers, because they need to fight or protect themselves from jawbreakers. So that is fun, a little bit of fantasy that children like to believe in. So it's a world of fantasy in a way that we are creating with stories. And of course, there are some other techniques, but I think that this one is memorable and it's fun, and it helps children remember how to solve a conflict just by acquiring certain techniques. And they remember because it worked in some classes. I'm trying these stories with some teachers and they say, well, Stella, they get the sound. That's the reason why I added a pre-task, because some teachers said at the very beginning, yes, the sound works, but they find it difficult to follow the story. So I said, well, let's work on a pre-task that facilitates the acquisition of the sound without having English as an obstacle to understand the story. And so, well, it's been proved. And if you try the story, please get in touch. I would like to hear your feedback.
Okay, let's see. We have maybe time for one more question. What a wonderful word when teachers create to solve a problem, setting a problem that is based in a pronunciation issue within a story. Awesome concept. Thank you, Stella.
Thank you, Rosemary. I appreciate it. Yes, I mean, what I like the most is to help the common teacher, because I studied many years pronunciation in Argentina, and I took many courses at university level. But I realized that we are always lecturing in phonology, teaching sounds. But then when it comes to teaching listening or reading, we don't help much. So if pronunciation is so important, where is it in the lesson plan? So there's something that we need to change. And I realize that we teachers need to create a lot of teaching material to help the common teacher, the common English teacher, once the teacher is graduated. So my major concern is that trying to create pronunciation material that really works in the classroom. More than the description of sounds, which is fantastic, that we need it. We need the IPA, we need everything. But first of all, we need to help them, the teachers that teaches a lesson, that teaches a class every day.
Okay, I don't think that we don't have any more questions. So this brings us to the conclusion of today's webinar, the Jawbreaker and the SOUND-TICKLERS, an EFL phonics storybook to teach pronunciation to young learners. A very special thank you to our presenter, Professor Stella Palavecino. And this concludes the webinar today. Thank you for joining us today.